You were right about David. He's a world breaker.
Wednesday.
The power is real. You gotta accept it.
I don't care if you save me. Save yourself.
Commission to launch the Peacemaker.
You don't have to be afraid.
Look at you. You're gods, and someday you're gonna realize you don't need to listen to us anymore.
Isn't that the history of the world?
Legion season finale, Wednesday at 10.
The readings are right. He may be the most powerful mutant that we have ever encountered.
I'd say that's an understatement.
David's very fragile.
He doesn't seem fragile.
That worries me.
These people's weakness is also their strength. And for people who are different than human, what is that really like on a sort of existential level to be telepathic or telekinetic or the powers that we explore on the show?
Three-dimensional characters are essential to good drama, and these characters are literally searching through the third dimension.
At the center of the story is this question of powers and who has what capacity.
Well, there's David Haller. His abilities seem to be unknown and unlimited.
Those who know who Legion is and who he represents in the Marvel-verse get very excited about him because he is this Omega-level mutant. This is not just a guy who can fly and lift things that are heavy. There's something really cosmic and crazy going on there.
I play Sid, who David meets at the mental hospital. In a world built on abilities and powers and who we are and figuring ourselves out, her aversion to being touched keeps her always questioning.
This place just doesn't seem real. Maybe it's a version of reality and not reality itself.
She feels like the window for the audience.
What do you mean?
To ask questions about this world.
It's beautiful.
Bill and I have a shared character, Carrie Loudermilk. My Carrie lives inside of his Carrie.
She and I are aspects of the same character.
Mine is very action-based, very strong, very physical. She's a fighter. His is very mindful. He's very smart. He's a scientist. There's Patonomy, played by Jeremy Harris.
Look through her memories while you keep her busy.
His power is memories. He remembers everything in his life, and if he's near you, he can remember everything in yours. He can go into your memories, look around, touch things, feel things.
Ultimately, we want to win this war and to allow ourselves the freedom as innocent people with powers to exist comfortably in the world.
Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So a lot of you requested a Legion explainer video for the last episode in the finale, so just because there's so much going on, no face cam, but here we go. Careful for spoilers from the latest episode if you haven't seen it yet. If you're new to the channel and you love comic book stuff, be sure to subscribe to get everything. There's going to be so much happening this weekend. So what I'm going to do is I'll explain some of the big twists of this episode, what's going on in the comics, and where this is all headed, because there's still a couple big theories that haven't been disproven. We've slowly started to learn that things are happening in David's mind in the astral plane that aren't real, that we believed were real in the past. So it's a big mind trip as to which people are actually real, which people are fake. So I'll try to explain that because I think the show has given us enough evidence as to what is real. And there are a lot of real people on this show. So I did this in a top 10 format just to make it easy to follow. Number 10, they officially revealed the villain that Aubrey Plaza has been playing this whole season. Amal Farouk, the Shadow King of the X-Men comics. So the really cool thing is the way they explained him in the episode is very accurate to his comic book origin story. So number 9, the origin of the Shadow King in the comics. The interesting thing is that the Shadow King himself is a separate entity from Amal Farouk. So Amal Farouk is just a powerful mutant from Cairo. The Shadow King inhabited his mind. The first time we met the Shadow King in the comics is when we met Amal Farouk. So that's why they're using this character. So the way they explain the Shadow King is that he's this ancient entity that forms like the dark side of human psyche. Since the dawn of humanity, he's just jumped from host to host. The first time we meet him is when he's inhabiting Amal Farouk and fights Professor X. So they did a version of that story on the blackboard. But the way they explain it is that Professor X, as a young man, was in love with Moira McTaggart, but he had to go to war. He was injured, went to a hospital. They went their separate ways. Eventually, he finds himself back in Cairo, gets his pocket picked by a young Aurora Monroe who hasn't become Storm yet. But as he's chasing her down to get his wallet back, like this is a Professor X that can still walk, he gets hit by this psychic blast and it's Amal Farouk. So eventually, they fight on the astral plane, he defeats him, but then later the Shadow King's essence comes back, the way they explain on the blackboard, to inhabit the mind of Professor X's child, David Haller, who debuted in a much later comic book. So they were very true to that comic book story when they were doing all these visuals, which were actually very cool. I thought it was a great way to explain this to people that don't read comics. Even if you have missed a couple episodes, you could probably understand the way they explain it here. So here's where it gets really cool. In order to help himself come to these conclusions, David conjures a mental projection of himself inside his own mind, inside the sunken place. If you haven't seen that movie, The Get Out, this prison that David's in inside his own mind, they kind of had a version of this going on. But the projection that he's talking to is a completely separate entity, but is basically himself. So he's talking to himself, even though it manifests as a separate being. He can also do this in the real world, which is why a lot of people have wondered when they're in the real world if these other people are fake. Are they just mental projections? I don't think that they are, and I'll explain why in a second. But number 6, everyone's physical bodies are trapped inside David's childhood home, frozen in this moment here with the bullets getting ready to hit David, while all their minds are in the thrall of the Shadow King inside the astral plane in this fake version of the mental hospital. So number 5, earlier this season, a lot of people are asking about the mental hospital. There was a real mental hospital that David was in with these other characters. That was real. One of the biggest pieces of evidence that lets us know that it's real is because these other characters outside of David in the real world, when he's not around, talk about it. There was a hospital. This is not that hospital right now in this episode. The other reason I don't think that this is all in David's head, like these people in here are real as they're trying to escape from the Shadow King, is because of all the effort they expended on this big action set piece with the glasses that Oliver created. They wouldn't have spent all that time developing these character arcs, making Oliver such a compelling character, making Carrie and Carrie compelling characters, and allowing him to go on this side mission to get Oliver to help them out, if it intended to just pull the rug out from under us and make them vanish at the end of the series. Like, oh, they weren't real, none of that stuff mattered. There will be some big twists that we might not expect, but I don't think that's going to be one of them. So if you're keeping a list of things that they want you to think are real but aren't real, it's really just the second time we go back to the hospital after the Shadow King has taken over their minds, and you see them all sitting in this ring here. Number 3, we see some of the characters step out of the mirrors into David's childhood home, and they start to fix the problem with the bullets. You see Oliver start to conjure that word shield around David. If you couldn't read the words, he's creating a shield around David, a physical shield, but all the little words just read shield. The reason it looks like that is, one, just to make it look really badass, like, oh, it's a shield, but it also says shield. Oliver is a very powerful telepath, just like David is. So when David saves them all and they get this, big bright light, that's when he's pulling them out of the astral plane back into their physical bodies. So number 2, they make it back to the facility. You find that Oliver seems like he's come back to the physical world, all chilling out, when the interrogator from the first episode rolls up with a small army from level 3 to take David back into custody, just as, number 1, the Shadow King makes a crack in David's mental prison. So based on the promo with like the red ring of light and the creepy way of David talking, makes it sound like the Shadow King will briefly take over his consciousness in the finale, in like the big action set piece will be him battling him out of his mind, separating the parasite from him. But what about the big Professor X twist? What about X-Men stuff? So they've already renewed it for season 2. So if they've revealed the what of David's past, but not the who specifically, like they haven't said Professor X is his father, even though they showed the wheelchair, they'll presumably push deeper into X-Men lore. So it's been an amazing series, and I love the way that they revealed all this information, the way they basically did a silent movie when the Shadow King was coming to kill them all, like after David had started to escape his mind. He's like, okay, fine, I'm just going to kill everybody. That was one of the best moments on television this week. I just totally love what they're doing with this series, and I hope more people find it before season 2. But what's going to happen later today is there's so much Justice League dropping, so once they finish dropping those teasers, I'll post another Justice League video, so that'll be in a couple hours. While you wait for that to post, you can click here for all the Justice League trailers I've been posting, and you can click here for new Guardians of the Galaxy. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you in that next video.